High in the misty hills and valleys of California, where the wind carries whispers from centuries past, there are ruins that do more than echo history. Ancient monasteries, long abandoned, stand in silence. Crumbling stone walls rise against overgrown gardens, broken archways lead to shadowed corridors. And the scent of damp earth and decay lingers in the air. But the silence is deceptive. Visitors report cold drafts that move against the wind. Footsteps echo along empty hallways where no one walks. Lantern lights appear and vanish. And at night, faint chanting rises from halls that should be empty. These monasteries were once places of prayer, devotion, and solitude. They witnessed devotion and despair, secret confessions and forbidden desires. Lives ended in sickness, accidents, or despair. Now, they are haunted. Some who enter return changed. Some never return at all. Tonight, we journey into the 20 most haunted monastery ruins in California. Places where faith and fear intertwine. And the walls themselves seem to remember every soul that ever walked their stone floors. If you were standing in the center of a crumbling cloister and heard chanting growing louder behind you, would you turn to Loka or would you run before you became part of the echo? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe and comfortable, because the places we are about to explore are old, cold, and filled with secrets that time has tried to bury. California's monastery ruins are scattered across the state, in valleys, hills, and forests. They were built to be places of peace and reflection, but over the centuries they became witnesses to tragedy. Fires, illness, violence, and abandonment all left marks upon the stones and gardens. Visitors today report strange phenomena. Flickering lights in hallways with no electricity. Cold spots that freeze the breath. Figures in tattered robes appearing and disappearing in the corridors. Voices echoing prayers or cries in languages no longer spoken. Some say the monks never left. Others claim that those who died here linger, unwilling to abandon the place that held their devotion and despair. Before we step into these ruins together, let me ask you something. If you wandered into an abandoned monastery at dusk and heard the soft chant of monks behind a collapsed archway, would you approach to Listina or would you turn and leave before the shadows reached for you? Take a deep breath. And let us explore the 20 most haunted monastery ruins in California. San Miguel ruins cling precariously to the steep hillside, their crumbling stone walls tumbling into the valley below. Once a thriving monastery, the complex now exists in partial collapse, with archways broken and roof tiles scattered among overgrown vegetation. Paths that once guided monks through courtyards now end abruptly at piles of rubble. And stairways descend into voids where floors have given way over centuries. From a distance, the ruins appear solemn, silent, and forgotten, yet there is a subtle presence in the air that suggests history has left more than stone behind. During the day, the ruins seem desolate but approachable. Sunlight filters through the arches and collapsed walls, illuminating fragments of frescoes and inscriptions weathered into obscurity. Birds circle overhead, and the wind whistles through the open corridors. Visitors walking the terraces feel the steep incline beneath their feet, navigating carefully among uneven stones. There is a quiet majesty to the place, a sense of devotion long abandoned yet preserved in the structure itself. As night falls, San Miguel reveals a different atmosphere. Shadows lengthen along the remaining walls, and the ruins feel more enclosed, as if the hillside has drawn itself closer. The wind dies down, and the usual sounds of nocturnal animals are muted by the weight of the valley. Visitors begin to notice faint chanting, drifting from the chapel ruins where the roof has long since caved in. The voices are soft, echoing through open spaces and down crumbled stairways, distant yet intimate, as if a single moment from centuries ago is replaying in fragments. The chanting is not constant. It rises and falls with a rhythm that is difficult to track, neither fully steady nor entirely random. Some describe it as a layered chorus of men and women in prayer, others as a solitary voice repeated by the echo of stone. The sound is not audible from every vantage point, but when it is heard, it commands attention, drawing listeners toward the chapel ruins as if guiding them to witness the past directly. When visitors approach the ruins where the chapel once stood, faint shapes appear among the stone remnants. Figures kneel in prayer where no one could physically stand, their outlines pale and barely distinguishable against the night. Their posture conveys devotion, hands clasped, heads bowed. The number of figures seems to change depending on the angle from which they are viewed. Some observers see a single kneeling figure, others see a group arranged in formation along the altar remains. Light, whether from the moon or flashlights, passes through them without disruption, reinforcing the ethereal quality. Visitors often hesitate, aware that the stone underfoot is unstable. The figures seem unconcerned with gravity, balanced where humans cannot stand safely. Their presence feels deliberate, a remnant of the rituals once practiced within these walls, persisting beyond the decay of time. The atmosphere of San Miguel ruins at night is heavy yet contemplative. The sound of distant chanting, the sight of ghostly figures kneeling, and the sheer verticality of the hillside combine to create a sensation of being observed and remembered. The place conveys reverence rather than menace. It is as if the past has left behind not anger or sorrow, but the echo of devotion, insistently repeating itself in the present. Historical records indicate that the monastery was founded centuries ago by an order known for strict discipline and daily liturgy. Monks maintained a rigorous schedule of prayer, study, and labor. The site was chosen for its isolation, overlooking the valley to provide both security and inspiration. Over time, natural disasters, erosion, and the passage of generations led to gradual abandonment. Documents reference occasional visits by pilgrims long after the monastery fell into ruin, yet the daily rituals ceased with the final inhabitants. Those who have walked the ruins at night suggest that the sounds and figures are not hallucinations. Multiple visitors report hearing chanting simultaneously, often with similar descriptions of the number and arrangement of figures. Some describe the chanting as coinciding with the phases of the moon, becoming clearer during certain nights and fading during others. Others say the figures kneel near intact walls where the acoustics carry sound, emphasizing the rhythm and depth of the voices. The phenomenon has subtle effects on those present. Visitors describe a sense of weight in the chest, a pull toward the altar, as though being invited into the ritual. Breathing slows involuntarily, and footsteps become tentative. The air feels cooler and denser near the chapel ruins. The emotional intensity is undeniable, leaving observers humbled and contemplative. The ruins themselves are unchanged, the collapsed walls still leaning and the terraces still treacherous. But the memory of chanting and kneeling figures persists. Explorers of San Miguel often leave at dawn with a lingering impression. The experience is described as immersive, and deeply affecting, with the sensation that time in the ruins is layered, allowing the present to coexist with centuries past. In daylight, the ruins appear ordinary once more, silent and empty. The hillside remains steep, the stones unstable, the structures partially collapsed. Sunlight illuminates the same fresco fragments and worn steps, but the chanting has vanished. The figures are no longer visible, leaving behind only memory and the soft echo of devotion that seems embedded in the ruins themselves. A site where architecture and history intersect with the unseen. And the persistence of ritual becomes a living space once again. The figures kneel in memory that refuses to be forgotten. Santa Rosa Cloister lies hidden behind walls that have long surrendered to ivy and moss. Stone arches jut from the ruins, fractured and worn, while gardens once meticulously planned have grown wild. Paths are obscured by undergrowth. Flower beds are tangled with weeds and brambles. The air smells of damp earth and salt from the nearby coast, heavy with the weight of centuries. Visitors stepping onto the grounds are met with an unsettling quiet. Birds avoid the overgrown trees. Wind passes through broken windows and fallen columns without scattering the silence. Every footstep on the crumbling stone seems amplified, echoing along corridors that no longer serve a living purpose. Despite the apparent abandonment, the cloister feels alive. Footsteps are heard along paths that have long been deserted. They are soft at first, easily mistaken for the rustling of leaves. Then they grow clearer, pacing along the worn cobblestones, approaching from angles where no one is visible. The sound comes and goes unpredictably, sometimes stopping as suddenly as it begins. The overgrown gardens provide little explanation. Branches bend in the breeze. Leaves drop. Yet the feeling of movement persists, as if something unseen is pacing between the hedges. Observers report that their presence is acknowledged subtly, through changes in the air or the faint brushing of foliage, though no figure emerges. A faint scent of incense lingers in the air, clinging to stone and air alike. There is no fire, no candles, no evidence of ritual, yet the aroma remains. Sweet and smoky, it drifts through corridors and arches, unmoored from any source. Soon, it becomes disorienting, carrying the suggestion of devotion without the living presence of monks or worshippers. The architecture amplifies the sense of history. Courtyards open to the sky, dotted with statues half swallowed by vines. Each step brings a new impression, a combination of silence, smell, and movement that feels orchestrated, as if the cloister itself is guiding visitors along its abandoned paths. Occasionally, observers glimpse shapes in their peripheral vision. A column seems to shift slightly, a shadow stretches across a broken doorway. Figures kneel near fallen benches, their forms never clear, as if composed of mist or light. When approached, these shapes dissolve into stone and vegetation, leaving only the impression of presence. The experience affects perception of time. Hours can pass unnoticed as visitors follow winding corridors or pause in courtyards. The sense of anticipation grows with each echoing footstep or drifting aroma. Despite the emptiness, the cloister seems attentive, aware of movement and intent. Attempts to document the phenomena yield only partial evidence. Cameras record empty corridors. Microphones pick up wind or distant birds, but nothing that corresponds directly with the footsteps or movement felt by those present. The scent of incense eludes instruments entirely, perceptible only to those who walk among the ruins. Local lore preserves fragments of the cloister's past. It once housed a small religious community, devoted to prayer and study. Monks tended the gardens, maintained the cloister, and walked its corridors in quiet ritual. Over time, the community disbanded. The walls fell to neglect, the gardens to wild growth, yet traces of their routines remain embedded in stone and soil. Visitors often sense the continuation of these rituals. Footsteps align with corridors where monks once passed. Courtyards echo with the rhythm of prayer. The lingering scent evokes devotion that endures despite the absence of people. The cloister communicates its history not through records, but through layered impressions, felt rather than seen. The gardens add to the challenge of navigation. Overgrown hedges obscure corners. Fallen statues mark spaces once orderly, now chaotic. Even experienced explorers report disorientation, a sense of moving both forward and backward at the same time, as though the cloister reshapes itself subtly around perception. Sounds and movement combine to create a pervasive sense of presence. Leaves crackle underfoot, yet no disturbance is visible. The air shifts, carrying the scent of incense, hinting at devotion that refuses to vanish. Those who linger describe a profound awareness of history and memory. The cloister does not intimidate, it observes. It evokes reverence, curiosity, and unease simultaneously. The combination of sound, scent, and visual suggestion creates an immersive experience, leaving visitors with the impression of being within a space that is both abandoned and inhabited in ways beyond ordinary perception. By sunset, the cloister transforms further. Shadows lengthen across the gardens, deepening the contrast between light and stone. Footsteps grow fainter or vanish entirely, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and distant echoes. The scent of incense lingers longer, subtle but persistent, reinforcing the presence of devotion in a space emptied of life. Santa Rosa Cloister remains a place where time and attention are suspended. Overgrown gardens conceal history. Echoing corridors hold memories. Shadows and scents mark the paths once traveled by those devoted to study and prayer. Visitors sense the layers of presence, walking carefully among stone and vegetation. Aware that the cloister holds echoes of life that cannot be fully captured or explained. Even after departure, the impression endures. Footsteps felt beside the visitor, faint incense in memory. And the awareness of movement in abandoned corridors leave a lasting sense of the cloister as a space alive with history, ritual, and subtle attention. Santa Rosa Cloister exists simultaneously as ruin and witness, preserving the traces of devotion and care. Through time, inviting all who enter to observe, reflect, and leave with the weight of its quiet presence. Mount Carmel ruins perch high above a deep canyon, carved into the side of a rocky hill that slopes steeply toward the valley below. From a distance, the monastery appears as a jagged silhouette against sky and stone, walls and towers crumbling yet resilient. Steps lead upward through narrow paths, worn by centuries of travel, each turn revealing a new angle of the canyon and the monastery itself. The wind moves freely here, carrying the scent of earth, stone, and distant vegetation, sweeping along ledges and terraces alike. Visitors approaching the ruins often feel a shift in atmosphere. The air seems heavier, quieter, as though the space holds on to sound. Footsteps echo more than expected along narrow hallways, bouncing from walls that are no longer solid, returning softened and slightly delayed. Conversation lowers instinctively, even without conscious thought, as though the monastery demands reverence in its silence. Then the bells begin. They do not ring consistently. No one pulls ropes. No wind moves them from tower to tower. Yet from somewhere deep within the ruins, faint chimes emerge, delicate and irregular. The sound carries across courtyards and terraces, rising and falling with the wind. The tone is hollow, ethereal, not mechanical, not easily located. Visitors turn, searching for a tower or a rope, but find nothing. The sound is everywhere and nowhere. Those who linger report another phenomenon. They do not fully take form. They are dark outlines, humanoid, pacing slowly from one end of the terrace to the other. They never approach the center of courtyards, never descend the stairs. Their movement is deliberate, methodical, as if tracing the route of centuries past. Light passes through them partially, reinforcing the sense that they exist between solidity and shadow. The figures respond neither to observation nor presence. Looking directly causes the edges to blur, the shapes becoming part of the stone and air. Looking away brings them back into focus, moving steadily as though unconcerned with attention. They repeat patterns that feel familiar, yet not personal, as if they are echoes of past inhabitants rather than entities with will. Hollow chambers, collapsed ceilings, and narrow corridors channel sound and shadow. Light behaves oddly along broken arches, refracting through cracks in ways that create unexpected brightness or darkness. Wind passes through open windows and doorways, carrying sound from one terrace to the next. Even small vibrations from footsteps resonate across spaces, mingling with the faint bell tones to create a layered, immersive atmosphere. Visitors often note a change in time perception. An hour can stretch into several. Steps taken seem longer, slower, weighted by the environment. The wind, the faint chimes, the shifting shadows create a sense of patience, urging stillness even when the climb demands movement. Those who attempt to hurry feel subtly slowed, their senses drawn into the rhythm of the ruins rather than their own intent. The ruins hold history as much as stone. Mount Carmel Monastery was constructed centuries ago as a place of solitude and worship, a sanctuary perched above the canyon for reflection and devotion. Over time, decay claimed portions of walls, towers, and living quarters. Yet the architecture remains remarkably intact, preserving corridors, balconies, and terraces where monks once walked, prayed, and tended to daily life. Some believe the bells and shadows are remnants of that life. They suggest the chimes are auditory echoes of past worship, ringing faintly through stone channels that have not yet settled into silence. The shadowy figures, they say, trace steps once taken by those who lived here, repeating routines embedded into the structure itself. Others point to natural causes. Wind, acoustics, and uneven light can create illusions. Small drafts can move hanging objects, creating faint ringing. Shadows cast on broken walls can appear humanoid when seen from a distance. These explanations account for some observations, but not the consistency. Witnesses report seeing similar forms and hearing the same tones over multiple visits, across different days, under varying conditions. Moonlight casts long, sharp shadows across terraces. Wind whistles through gaps, carrying the faint, hollow tones of the bells. Figures become more defined in dim light, pacing along balcony edges that feel narrower and more exposed. The canyon below drops away silently, adding a sense of vertigo to the observation. The space feels both protective and exposing, as though inviting attention while warning of distance. Those who climb higher note subtle interactions with sound and shadow. Step lightly along worn stairs, and a chime may sound as though in response. Pause to observe, and shadows shift along terrace edges. Neither phenomenon follows predictably, yet both seem aware of human presence. The effect is hypnotic, drawing attention outward to the edges, to the spaces between walls and sky. Visitors eventually descend. Returning to the base of the canyon, they find daylight and air restored to normal. Bells cease. Shadows disappear. Light returns to even levels. The ruins stand quiet, solid, immobile. Yet the memory of sound and motion lingers in the mind, carrying a subtle awareness of being observed, of the monastery still in action, though empty. Mount Carmel ruins remain open to exploration. Tourists and historians alike wander corridors, terraces, and balconies, documenting architecture, photographing the view. Most experience the quiet majesty of high stone and distant canyon. Some, however, notice the faint ringing, the shifting shadows, the subtle tug of history embedded in stone. They speak quietly of rhythm and motion, aware that these elements resist simple explanation. The monastery exists between time and perception. It is simultaneously present and absent, active yet empty, solid yet shifting. Bells ring. Figures pace. Wind carries sound across terraces. Shadows stretch and fade. Light falls differently in every corner. The ruins remind visitors that even in decay, presence can persist. Here, above the canyon, the monastery continues its routines. The monastery continues its routines. Its stone walls remember footsteps. Its towers carry chimes across empty space. Its balconies trace paths that no longer hold life, yet still feel animated. Mount Carmel remains a living memory of those who built it, walked it, and prayed within. Echoing through the air and into the minds of those who visit. A testament to architecture, devotion, and the persistence of human presence in the most silent and elevated of places. San Antonio ruins rise from the ground like memories frozen in stone. Broken archways lean at impossible angles, their keystones fractured and cracked. Collapsed walls form narrow corridors where sunlight barely reaches. Dust drifts in motes that move slowly through the stale air. The silence is deep, punctuated only by the wind slipping through openings. The occasional call of a distant bird breaks the stillness. Visitors step carefully across uneven floors. Stone fragments crunch underfoot. Loose bricks shift slightly, sending small echoes down the corridors. The layout is confusing, even for those who study maps beforehand. Passageways twist and turn unexpectedly, creating dead ends and hidden alcoves. Shadows stretch along the walls, shifting with the movement of light and the position of the observer. It is here that the apparitions are most often seen. Figures in old robes appear briefly at the edges of vision. Monks, perhaps, walking slowly or pausing as if in contemplation. They move with calm purpose, hands folded or adjusting simple garments. Some vanish behind corners, reappearing nowhere. Others dissolve mid-step, leaving the observer questioning whether the sight was real or conjured by the imagination. The effect is subtle at first. A hint of movement in a hallway. A slight shift of shadow. A slight shift of shadow. A change in the air, almost imperceptible, drawing attention in ways that feel involuntary. Observers often stop walking, their breath catching as the figure passes, only to see nothing moments later. Soft whispers sometimes rise unexpectedly. The sound is low, melodic, and almost imperceptible at first. The language is unfamiliar, archaic. Words in Latin float briefly, weaving through the ruined corridors before fading into silence. The whispers do not follow a single source. They emerge from behind arches, around corners, sometimes above where walls have crumbled. Their tone is calm, ritualistic, patient. Those who hear them rarely speak aloud. The whispers are not threatening, yet they evoke a sense of presence that is immediate and intimate. Visitors report hairs rising along the back of the neck, a deep awareness of being observed without malice. The voices appear to respond to attention, quieting when listeners focus directly on them and returning once curiosity wanes. The corridors themselves contribute to the sensation. Arches form frames that narrow vision. Collapsed walls create partial enclosures that manipulate perspective. Light and shadow play across surfaces in unpredictable ways, guiding attention toward spaces just beyond reach. The ruins seem to encourage movement while simultaneously delaying it, compelling visitors to pause and observe. Historical records provide context. San Antonio ruins were once a monastic settlement, a place of study, prayer, and ritual. Walls erected centuries ago bore witness to the daily life of those who walked these halls. Chapels echoed with chanting. Gardens and courtyards offered spaces of quiet contemplation. The architecture was designed for solitude, for careful movement, for observation of the sacred. Even in decay, the structure retains the flow of its original purpose. This intentional design amplifies the sense of being followed or observed, and it aligns perfectly with reports of figures in robes. Some visitors describe following the figures. They move carefully through narrow passageways, attempting to reach the disappearing monk, only to find themselves at another arch or dead end. The ruins appear to shift subtly, or perhaps the observer loses their orientation. What seemed straightforward moments ago now requires careful attention to footing and direction. Chanting rises softly from hallways that appear empty. The voice feels close yet distant. It surrounds visitors in layers, creating the impression of multiple speakers, of ritual in progress. The language is incomprehensible, yet the cadence conveys purpose, solemnity, and timelessness. Those who linger report changes in perception. Distances seem altered. Hallways stretch slightly longer than anticipated. Archways appear narrower or higher than expected. Shadows deepen in corners. Light from openings flickers and shifts in ways that cannot be explained by clouds or sun position. The ruins themselves feel alive, subtly responding to movement and attention. Footsteps echo differently here. Stone amplifies sound in some areas, absorbs it in others. A footstep can arrive late, misaligned with its source. This delay often coincides with reports of figures, enhancing the impression of presence. The combination of sound, shadow, and whispering creates an immersive experience that engages multiple senses at once. Daylight changes the perception. In full sun, the ruins appear static. Shadows are sharp. Details are clear. Visitors still report noticing robes at the edge of vision, but the effect is diminished. The whispers fade into ambient noise, and the sensation of being followed is reduced. The ruins are still impressive, but less uncanny. At dusk, the full effect returns. Light softens, shadows stretch, and temperature drops slightly. Corridors seem longer. Figures appear more clearly. Whispers rise and fall unpredictably. Observers feel a quiet tension, a heightened awareness of the space around them, as if the ruins themselves are acknowledging their presence. Visitors often leave with lasting impressions. The slow movement of monks, the texture of stone underfoot. The texture of stone underfoot, the distant and delicate whispering in Latin. The distant and delicate whispering in Latin. The experience is immersive, emotional, and impossible to forget. Some describe a sense of calm mixed with solemn unease. As if they have briefly shared the attention of the centuries. Collapsed walls and broken arches form corridors that guide the eye and body. Shadows play among the stones. Figures sometimes move just beyond sight. Soft Latin phrases echo faintly through empty halls. The site preserves not only architecture but the feeling of a living, sacred space in decay. Allowing visitors to glimpse the rhythm and presence of the lives that once walked its halls. Leaving behind echoes that endure in stone, shadow, and whisper. Holy Cross Monastery ruins rise from the surrounding landscape. As a collection of stone walls and archways. Slowly surrendering to time. The air is heavy with history. Every step carries the memory of lives structured around devotion, discipline, and routine. The courtyard, though silent now, still echoes with the weight of those who moved through it centuries before, their footsteps and prayers embedded in the worn stone. Visitors who enter the ruins often pause at the threshold of the main hall. The vaulted ceilings have partially collapsed, leaving gaps that let in wind and light. Here, the contrast between openness and enclosure is stark, the quiet punctuated by the occasional creak of timber and the whisper of shifting stone. The quiet punctuated by the occasional creak of timber and the whisper of shifting stone. Figures are sometimes seen kneeling near the crumbling altars. At first glance, they are indistinguishable from the ruins themselves. Moving closer reveals only empty space. The shapes vanish as if they existed only at the edge of perception. Leaving behind the faint impression that someone has passed, or paused, in prayer. The cloistered hallways amplify the sense of presence. Narrow passages lined with stone columns wind away from the courtyard. Leading to rooms that no longer serve a function. Within these corridors, some visitors hear the clatter of unseen chains. The sound is metallic, abrupt, echoing from walls where no hinges or shackles remain. Each clang is isolated, followed by silence that stretches uncomfortably before any echo returns. The clatter does not follow a pattern. It is not repetitive, nor does it increase in volume or frequency with attention. Appearing when the mind is most attuned to movement or sound, then fading without warning. The ruins themselves tell a story of endurance and decay. Outer walls, partially intact, bear marks of weather and neglect. Moss and lichen coat the stones, softening sharp edges. Windows are empty frames. And remnants of stained glass lie broken beneath them. Faint color still visible in shards that glint in sunlight. Courtyard fountains, long dry, hint at former ritual and utility. Their basins now collecting rainwater and leaf litter. Walking through the monastery, visitors feel the duality of absence and presence. The emptiness is tangible, yet it is filled with the sense of former order. Every doorway, every threshold, carries the expectation of movement, of feet on stone and voices lifted in chant. Shadows linger at angles that do not align with light, suggesting figures that are no longer there but whose habits remain. The chapel, though partially roofless, retains a solemn atmosphere. Figures kneeling here appear more frequently in the mid-afternoon light, their forms stretching along the altar steps, vanishing when approached. The effect is subtle, a blend of perspective and imagination, yet consistent across multiple observers. Sounds within the monastery are equally deceptive. Wind whistles through broken windows and gaps in the roof, carrying echoes along corridors. Footsteps reverberate unnaturally, sometimes when no one moves. The occasional chain clatter punctuates the stillness, suggesting activity in abandoned areas. These auditory cues reinforce the impression that the routines of its former inhabitants persist in intangible form. Visitors often describe a sense of rhythm to the experience. Movement through the courtyard aligns with the occasional sounds, guiding perception. Turning a corner may coincide with a fleeting shadow near an altar. The mind integrates these cues, blending memory, expectation, and sensory input to produce the impression of life that continues despite absence. The ruins are also affected by natural light. Shadows elongate and shorten, altering the perceived position of figures kneeling or standing. Afternoon light exaggerates angles, making shapes appear where there are none, while morning light brings clarity to spaces previously shrouded. Historical context enhances the atmosphere. Holy Cross Monastery once hosted a sizable community, structured by ritual and labor. Its halls were filled with prayer, work, and discipline, each space designed for a specific purpose. Courtyards allowed contemplation. The chapel offered a space for communal worship. The physical layout reinforced the rhythm of life within. Now, that rhythm exists only in memory, preserved in the stones themselves. Visitors perceive echoes of activity not through sight alone, but through spatial awareness. And subtle sensory cues. The shapes kneeling, the chains clattering, the feeling of footsteps in empty corridors are reminders that human activity once defined the space, and that it lingers in ways both tangible and intangible. Despite decay, the monastery maintains its presence. The weeds that fill the courtyard, the crumbling altars, and the collapsed ceilings are not merely remnants. They frame perception, guiding attention to the contrasts between absence and presence. They allow the mind to fill gaps, creating experiences that feel both authentic and ephemeral. Those who explore Holy Cross Monastery ruins carry with them a heightened awareness of environment. Each step requires attention. Each sound invites interpretation. The space challenges assumptions about emptiness, teaching that absence does not preclude influence, and that the past can leave impressions long after the present has moved on. As the sun lowers, shadows lengthen. Figures at altars seem to linger longer. Chain clatters echo further down hallways. Courtyard weeds sway in the breeze, carrying the faintest scent of damp earth. The monastery appears alive in its own rhythm, a place where memory and material meet, and visitors sense that the routines of devotion have not entirely left the walls. Holy Cross Monastery ruins remain a testament to endurance, transformation, and the subtle persistence of human presence. The courtyard may be choked with weeds, the altars may crumble, and the halls may be empty. Yet the echoes of centuries linger in light, sound, and perception, offering a quiet, immersive reminder of a life once sustained here. Mount St. Clair ruins sit atop a remote hill, their stone walls weathered and softened by centuries of exposure. Moss clings to the rocks, and lichen spreads across fractured surfaces, giving the ruins a quiet, green patina that blends with the surrounding forest. Pathways that once guided visitors and residents through courtyards are overgrown, marked only by uneven stones and fallen timber. The hillside rises steeply, making the ascent deliberate and slow, each step bringing the observer closer to a structure that is both fragile and commanding. During the day, the ruins feel solemn yet serene. Sunlight filters through cracks in walls and collapsed archways, illuminating small details: a carved column, a fragment of fresco, an old stairway leading nowhere. Birds perch on ledges and call across the hillside, their songs filling the spaces that the wind does not reach. The moss and lichen release the earthy scent of damp stone and decomposing leaves, grounding the visitor in the natural reclamation of the site. As night approaches, Mount St. Clair takes on a different presence. Temperature drops suddenly as the sun sinks behind the hill. Even in mild weather, the air along the upper terraces feels heavier, sharper, colder. Visitors report goosebumps and a sense of hesitation as they move through narrow corridors or enter the remains of the main hall. The stones themselves seem to draw in warmth, leaving the air around them thin and chilling. Faint sounds begin to emerge. Chanting drifts from the deeper rooms of the ruins, soft at first, almost indistinguishable from the wind through broken windows. Over time, the voices grow clearer, forming patterns that suggest a ritual or repeated prayer. The chant is not constant but appears in waves, rising and falling with the rhythm of the unseen, echoing against the walls and along collapsed staircases. Its source is impossible to locate, leaving listeners disoriented as they follow the sound through corridors that lead nowhere. Footsteps accompany the chanting. They echo in empty rooms, heavy yet measured, as though someone moves deliberately along the stone floors. The sound comes from multiple directions, yet remains cohesive, never overlapping in a chaotic way. Observers often stop, listening carefully, only to find that the rooms are empty, the stones silent under their own feet. When they step forward, the echoes adjust, seeming to follow them, or retreat, maintaining distance yet remaining perceptible. The effect is heightened by the ruina-esque architecture. Long hallways, partially collapsed ceilings, and uneven floors amplify sound unpredictably. Every creak of timber, every stone displaced underfoot carries, sometimes mimicking or overlaying the echoes of the phantom movements. Observers cannot tell whether the sounds are reflections of their own steps or something originating independently. Visitors describe a tangible presence in the ruins. The combination of sudden cold, chanting, and echoing footsteps creates a sensation of being watched without direct observation. The air feels dense, as if charged by repeated activity over centuries. There is no menace, but an acute awareness that the spaces themselves are alive with history, memory, and ritual. Time seems to slow, each moment elongated, each shadow and sound accentuated. Historical accounts provide fragments of context. Mount St. Clair was once a monastic retreat, a place of devotion and study. Residents maintained strict schedules of prayer, work, and meditation, with certain areas reserved for communal worship. Architectural evidence suggests a complex network of halls, chapels, and cloisters, many of which are now partially collapsed. Records indicate that storms, neglect, and gradual abandonment allowed the site to decay, leaving only remnants of what was once an active center of faith. Oral histories passed down through the region speak of monks who remained at the site long after it was officially closed, conducting prayers and maintaining the grounds in isolation. These accounts suggest that devotion may have left a lingering imprint, audible in the spaces where they once gathered. Visitors often experience this imprint subjectively. Some perceive chanting in a single room, others hear it layered across multiple spaces simultaneously. Footsteps appear to circle them, sometimes following corridors, sometimes descending stairways that have collapsed. The sounds are not random, they exhibit rhythm and pattern, suggesting intentionality, as though the ruins themselves remember the movements and prayers of former inhabitants. The cold intensifies near collapsed walls and stone ledges. The stones themselves feel colder than air alone would dictate. A sense of weight presses lightly on the chest, subtle but unmistakable. Even those familiar with the site for decades report a shiver when chanting begins. A tightening in the muscles, or an involuntary pause when footsteps echo nearby. Attempts to record or capture the phenomena are inconsistent. Audio equipment often fails to pick up clear chanting, capturing only faint distortion or low-frequency hum. Cameras show empty rooms, undisturbed stone floors, and the play of shadows but no visible figures. The experience remains largely perceptual, dependent on presence and attention. Despite the unsettling sensations, Mount St. Clair does not feel hostile. The echoes of prayer, the measured footsteps, and the drop in temperature create reverence rather than fear. Visitors frequently report leaving the site contemplative, their minds dwelling on devotion, history, and the persistence of memory in the physical world. The ruins convey a continuity of human presence, a repetition of ritual and movement that transcends the decay of stone and mortar. As dawn approaches, the sounds fade. Chanting disappears. Footsteps cease. Temperature begins to normalize. Shadows shrink with the rising sun. The hill resumes its ordinary appearance, stones covered in moss and lichen, walls crumbling into the valley. Nature reclaims the site during daylight, masking the echoes until night falls again. Mount St. Clair ruins remain on the hillside, a testament to devotion, endurance, and memory. They are a place where the past is audible, where the weight of history can be felt in every step. And where the stones themselves hold the imprint of lives once dedicated to prayer and reflection. The ruins wait patiently for those who venture into them at night, offering the faint but unmistakable presence of what has never fully departed. St. Benedict ruins rise from the hillside where the monastery once commanded both respect and quiet devotion. Stone walls stretch toward the sky, fractured by age and neglect. Roofs have fallen in, leaving jagged edges exposed to the elements. The air carries the scent of damp stone, moss, and the faint tang of salt from nearby winds. Every surface speaks of time past and purpose abandoned. Once, the monastery was a center of learning and prayer. Monks moved through corridors with books in hand, chanting in unison, tending gardens, and guiding novices along structured routines. Light fell through high windows, illuminating stone floors polished by decades of careful footsteps. Libraries held manuscripts, cloisters echoed with quiet conversation. And staircases carried the faithful to upper chambers for contemplation and study. Now, the place is hollow. Silence dominates where voices once rose in measured rhythm. Footfalls on broken floors resonate unnaturally, carrying farther than they should. Wind whistles through collapsed walls and missing windows, threading between the ruins like a living thing. Sunlight penetrates in patches, striking rubble and overgrown vegetation, but the shadows hold a deeper darkness, hiding the scale of decay. Visitors first notice the staircases. At the top of wide stone steps, faint flickers appear in the dim light. There is no power. No wiring. No visible source. The lights blink on and off, casting long, uncertain shadows that stretch along walls and across broken floors. They appear intermittently, sometimes just long enough to draw the eye, sometimes for minutes, illuminating areas that would otherwise remain hidden. The effect is disorienting. A figure glimpsed for a moment may be gone when attention returns. Shadows appear to shift between columns and fallen arches, suggesting movement even when the observer stands perfectly still. Those who explore the ruins describe the sensation of being watched, though nothing is ever fully visible. Figures glide along the edges of perception, silent, deliberate, never drawing close but never leaving entirely. The corridors amplify these impressions. Long hallways with broken ceilings echo every sound. A dropped stone reverberates along the floors. Air currents mimic movement, brushing over rubble with the suggestion of passing feet. Even the faintest motion of leaves through broken windows can appear intentional, reinforcing the feeling that the monastery itself is aware of those who traverse it. Explorers report a sequence of experiences that repeat across different areas of the ruins. The flickering lights appear first, drawing attention upward. Movement is sensed in peripheral vision. Shadows shift between collapsed walls. A faint draft carries a smell reminiscent of old incense, lingering without source. Each element builds upon the others, producing a sense of presence that is difficult to attribute solely to imagination or environment. The upper chambers are particularly unsettling. Stone steps lead to floors where ceiling timbers have collapsed, leaving jagged openings. Light from broken windows illuminates piles of rubble. But at the edge of perception, figures are glimpsed kneeling or standing, heads bowed or turned toward passageways. They do not move in a human rhythm. They glide, pause, and vanish when approached directly. Sound adds to the effect. Occasional echoes suggest footsteps behind, in corridors that are empty. Whispers arrive carried by wine through the structure, though no mouths form them. The mix of natural acoustics and the environment of ruin creates the illusion of conversation, of careful study or silent work, present but inaccessible. Overgrown gardens encroach on the ruins. Stone pathways crack under root growth. Clusters of vegetation obscure collapsed walls and half-intact cloisters. Sunlight filtering through leaves adds flickering patterns to already unstable light, increasing uncertainty and amplifying the perception of figures moving in the shadowed areas. Those who spend time in the ruins often describe a physical reaction. A tightening in the chest. A heightened awareness of movement. Moments can stretch. Sound becomes exaggerated. Perception sharpens in ways that feel unnatural. As if the mind is being guided by the architecture itself. Local historians note that the monastery was abandoned gradually. Declining orders, structural damage, and storms forced closure over decades. Stones fell naturally. Gardens became wild. Yet certain elements remain as they always did: staircases, corridors, high windows, and the rhythm of spaces designed for study and devotion. It is these elements, preserved in partial ruin, that interact with perception to create the impressions of lights and figures. Visitors leave the ruins with lasting impressions. Flickering lights at the top of staircases, the glide of shadowed figures, the faint scent of incense. The experience is immersive, leaving awareness stretched between reality and suggestion. The ruins maintain their presence quietly, silently, and without explanation. St. Benedict ruins continue to rise against the hillside, a hollow shell of devotion, learning, and human presence. They remain a place where architecture, memory, and environment converge, producing moments of observation that feel alive, even in absence. And where those who explore the site encounter the lingering echoes of a life once structured by ritual, study, and quiet reflection. San Luis Obispo Monastery ruins rest atop a gentle rise overlooking rolling hills and the distant city below. Weathered stone walls frame empty courtyards where once cloistered monks moved in quiet rhythm. Time has claimed the roofs and stairways, leaving only skeletal structures, arches, and scattered columns standing against sky and wind. The air carries the scent of earth, wildflowers, and damp stone, a reminder that nature has begun to reclaim what was built by human hands. Visitors often arrive on winding trails that circle the monastery. The path narrows and opens repeatedly, revealing glimpses of courtyards, chapels, and staircases leading to nowhere. Each turn alters perspective, hiding and revealing portions of the ruins, making it easy to lose orientation. Footsteps on gravel echo softly, swallowed by the expanse of open air, yet amplified against the tall, uneven walls. Running water, though no fountain exists, seems to appear around corners and in shaded areas. The sound is gentle, trickling, constant in its rhythm. It comes from no visible source. Listeners instinctively search for streams, fountains, or pipes, yet find nothing. The noise drifts across courtyards, down corridors, over broken stone steps. Sometimes it comes close enough to startle, as if water is flowing just beneath the surface of the ground itself. The perception is disarming. The mind expects reason, a visible cause, yet the sensation persists. The running water is both near and distant, moving with the observer, lingering wherever attention drifts. Some hikers report standing still, listening for minutes, trying to pinpoint its origin, only to feel it shift subtly when approached. Alongside the sound, soft chanting is sometimes heard. It is not loud, not commanding, but intimate, layered into the ambient sounds of wind and stone. The chant is melodic, low, almost imperceptible, repeating in short cycles. Many describe the chanting as calming at first, then strangely insistent. It encourages forward movement, or perhaps just attention. The longer one walks, the more noticeable it becomes, the closer it seems to be. It appears in the open courtyards and along narrow corridors alike, wrapping around corners and through broken archways. The sound persists, even when visitors pause to rest or inspect the ruins. It follows without pressure, subtle yet unavoidable. Some hikers experience a sensation of touch. Not sharp or painful, but fleeting, like a breeze brushing across bare skin. It is most commonly felt along the shoulders or arms. The touch is never enough to cause alarm, yet it elicits awareness. No figure, no shadow, only the ruins standing silent and unchanged. Stone walls seem to lean inward. Courtyards feel enclosed despite open sky. Corridors stretch farther than their physical length. The mind becomes attuned to subtle cues. Interpreting shifts in air, the flow of wind, or the movement of leaves as signals. Space feels simultaneously expansive and intimate, imposing and protective. Historical accounts offer context without explanation. The monastery was founded centuries ago, a place of devotion and contemplation. Water management was integral to daily life, fountains and cisterns providing for monks' needs. Chanting accompanied prayer and ritual, filling courtyards and halls with sound. Life followed strict patterns of movement, sound, and attention, repeated over decades. The ruins themselves retain the shape of these rituals, the echoes of practice embedded into structure and landscape. Engineers and acousticians acknowledge the possibility of natural amplification. Air moving through uneven walls and broken archways can carry sound far from its source. Moisture in stone can cause subtle shifts in airflow and vibration, generating noises that resemble running water or faint human voice. Light and shadow can exaggerate movement along walls and through gaps, giving the impression of figures where none exist. Yet these explanations fail to account for the interaction with visitors, how the sounds and sensations appear to follow movement, adjusting subtly to pace and position. The ruins encourage stillness and attentiveness. Visitors report that lingering in one courtyard or along a passage intensifies perception. The water sound seems closer. The sense of touch becomes more noticeable. The ruins appear responsive, not in a conscious way, but through the interplay of space, architecture, and environment. Walking resumes, and the effects recalibrate, moving with the observer. As daylight fades, the monastery becomes more immersive. Shadows lengthen across cracked tiles and stairways. Air cools, carrying the scents of stone and vegetation. The sound of wind in empty corridors mingles with faint trickles of water and low chanting, creating an auditory landscape that is difficult to distinguish from reality. Figures, suggested in shadow or peripheral vision, seem to pace along balconies or stairs, just beyond clear view. Visitors eventually descend back toward the surrounding hills. With distance, the sounds fade, and the sense of presence diminishes. Sunlight or moonlight restores spatial clarity. The air feels lighter, and the mind relaxes. Yet memory preserves the subtle awareness. The soft brush of touch. The persistent chanting. The sound of running water. That seems to exist only in this space. San Luis Obispo Monastery ruins remain accessible and quiet by day, studied for history, architecture, and natural beauty. Hikers and visitors return regularly, but those who have experienced the combined sensations speak of them cautiously, quietly, mindful of the ways the ruins shape perception. The stone walls, empty corridors, and open courtyards carry centuries of human activity, ritual, and devotion. They continue to interact with the present, creating an environment that is both serene and uncanny, a place where sound, shadow, and touch persist, reminding visitors that the traces of the past endure in subtle and compelling ways. Carmel Valley ruins sit atop a quiet hill, surrounded by thick stands of oak and pine. The ruins are composed of stone walls, weathered archways, and collapsed roofs that hint at the monastery's former grandeur. Visitors step carefully across uneven floors. Stone underfoot is worn smooth in places and fractured in others. Every step echoes differently depending on location, carrying sound far down corridors that are open to the mist outside. Narrow hallways lead to courtyards and cloisters, some filled with remnants of carved benches or fallen pillars. The layout is complex, a labyrinth of past devotion now left to decay. It is in the fog that the ruins reveal their most unsettling features. Figures sometimes appear kneeling among the mist. They are distant at first, silhouettes shaped by faint light, barely more than shadows. Their posture is unmistakable, heads bowed, hands folded, still in prayer. They occupy corners of courtyards, spaces beneath arches, or narrow passageways where sunlight cannot reach. Approach them and they vanish. No movement, no trace, just empty air where presence was just seconds before. Those who witness it often pause, caught between disbelief and awe, feeling the space is larger than expected, yet intimately alive. Footsteps echo across the stone floors despite no one being inside. The sound is subtle at first. A slow, deliberate cadence that seems to follow corridors, rising over fallen rubble and fallen arches. Visitors glance toward the source, expecting someone to appear, but no one emerges. The echoes continue, clear and consistent, fading as if moving further away, only to return along a different corridor moments later. Stone carries sound unusually well here. Acoustic shifts between open courtyards and narrow passageways create echoes that seem to move independently. The wind can carry subtle sounds across great distances. These explanations account for some experiences, yet not the timing of appearances, or the moments when footsteps accompany the misted figures and then stop abruptly. Fog enhances the atmosphere. It softens edges, blurs perspective, and hides the decay of collapsed walls. Light filters through it, casting long, ghostly shadows that seem to stretch unnaturally. Movement in this softened world can be misinterpreted, yet witnesses consistently describe the kneeling figures appearing in the same areas across different visits. Visitors report an immediate shift in perception. When kneeling figures are visible, silence deepens. Sound other than footsteps seems muffled. The air feels colder, heavier, almost tangible. Movement across the floors requires extra care, as if the ruins themselves demand attention and respect. The sense of being observed is subtle but persistent, present without malice, yet impossible to ignore. As night falls, the ruins take on another character. Fog thickens. Visibility is reduced to a few steps ahead. The kneeling figures, when they appear, are barely more than shadows within shadows. The footsteps echo louder against empty stone, growing more deliberate. Visitors often feel a pull toward the center of courtyards, as if drawn into the history that the ruins carry, compelled to witness what remains invisible to the casual eye. Historical records provide context for the experience. Carmel Valley Monastery was active centuries ago, a place of quiet devotion, study, and prayer. Monks moved through cloisters in measured steps, chanted prayers in unison, and observed rituals that required precision and repetition. The stone retains more than structure. Channels of movement that once guided disciplined life. Echoes, impressions of footsteps, patterns of motion remain embedded in the corridors. In fog, the mind interprets them as presence, giving form to memory without physical proof. The kneeling figures and echoes are consistent with where monks would have spent time in prayer, following routines repeated daily for generations. Visitors who linger report physiological effects. A tightening in the chest, heightened awareness of ambient sound, and the sense of being watched without threat. Time feels altered, measured by faint echoes rather than clocks. The fog dampens light and sound, concentrating perception. Small movements, a footstep behind, a shift in air, can feel amplified. By morning, the experience fades. Sunlight disperses the fog, restoring clarity. The kneeling figures disappear. Footsteps cease. The ruins return to their ordinary appearance. Stones are still fractured, walls still collapsed, yet the atmosphere of unseen presence eases. Visitors step down from the corridors with a lingering impression of having walked through a space that continues to observe, to remember, and to echo its history. Carmel Valley ruins endure. Broken archways and crumbled walls remain, corridors formed by history rather than design. Fog rolls in consistently, softening edges and preserving mystery. Figures appear and vanish, footsteps sound and disappear, whispers rise and fade. Those who visit leave carrying more than images. They carry the quiet weight of devotion, the echo of ritual, the soft impression of kneeling figures in mist. The lingering awareness that Carmel Valley ruins are a place where time, memory, and presence continue to intertwine in ways that are tangible, yet invisible. Waiting for the next observer to step carefully across stone and shadow. San Jacinto ruins sit on the edge of a dense forest, where trees rise close enough to brush against the outer walls of the monastery. The building is largely intact, yet time has left its mark. Stone walls are cracked, roof tiles have fallen, and moss climbs the surfaces in uneven patterns. Paths that once guided visitors now vanish into undergrowth, leaving the monastery isolated and quietly imposing. Visitors arrive along narrow trails, the forest swallowing the sounds of footsteps before they reach the ruins. The monastery appears frozen in a state between use and abandonment. Courtyards are overgrown with wild plants, stone benches cracked and uneven. The main gates hang slightly off their hinges, opening with a groan when touched, resisting intrusion yet permitting passage. Inside, the silence is not absolute. Doors creak as though pushed by unseen hands. Shutters rattle, not from wind, but from subtle movements within the empty frames. The sounds are intermittent, unpredictable, and echo down hallways lined with columns and arches. Each step forward draws attention to the stillness and the faint vibrations in the floor, as if the building itself is aware of movement within. Collapsed towers rise along the perimeter, their interiors darkened by fallen beams and rubble. Visitors sometimes glimpse dark shapes perched within these ruins, watching silently. The forms are distant, sometimes indistinct, blending into shadow and stone. A shape shifts when looked at directly, disappearing into the backdrop. These glimpses leave the impression of presence without proximity, the feeling that the monastery has eyes where none should exist. The hallways inside the monastery are narrow and winding. Light filters through gaps in the walls and broken windows, casting streaks across uneven floors. Dust rises slowly from steps taken, drifting in the sunbeams that pierce the gloom. The echoes of footsteps are exaggerated here, bouncing along stone surfaces, creating the sense of others walking just beyond perception. Occasionally, a door or shutter moves without apparent cause, reinforcing the sensation that the space is aware, responsive to occupancy. The ruins themselves tell a story of endurance and decay. Sculptures of saints and angels lean from walls or have toppled to the ground. Courtyard fountains lie dry, their basins filled with fallen leaves and debris. The cloistered areas offer glimpses of former order, repeating arches, small niches once containing icons, corridors leading to rooms no longer accessible. All these elements convey a rhythm, a memory of human activity, now subtly imprinted into the architecture. Visitors often describe a dual sensation, awe at the scale and craftsmanship of the monastery, and unease at its quiet vigilance. Shadows appear longer than expected. Shapes at the corner of vision suggest movement that is not present when examined directly. Sound carries differently here. A small noise can seem amplified, traveling unexpectedly down a corridor or into a distant courtyard. This combination creates an immersive sense of attention within the ruins. The towers, particularly, draw notice. From the forest floor, they rise like sentinels. Observers report feeling watched when looking toward them. Small details, such as the shifting angle of shadows or the glint of light on stone, reinforce the impression that shapes occupy the space. These dark presences do not move toward the visitor, nor do they retreat. They remain, suggesting observation without interference. At night, the monastery becomes even more pronounced in its isolation. Moonlight filters through collapsed roofs and broken windows, casting jagged patterns across floors. Shadows lengthen and merge with darkness in corners. The sounds of creaking doors and rattling shutters increase in clarity, suggesting movement within rooms that cannot be reached. The forest beyond whispers in the wind. Despite these experiences, the ruins are not hostile. There is no threat or attack. The building does not force movement or direct behavior. Instead, it demands awareness, encouraging visitors to observe closely, to recognize the nuances of light, shadow, and sound. The monastery communicates subtly, its presence reinforced through sensory cues rather than direct interaction. Instead of trying to force a reaction, it invites the viewer to explore and understand. Exploration of the San Jacinto ruins requires careful attention. Uneven floors, broken masonry, and overgrown pathways present physical hazards, which are heightened by the psychological effects of perceived observation. Those who move deliberately and maintain focus tend to navigate the site successfully. Pausing in courtyards or near towers increases the likelihood of noticing subtle phenomena, such as shifting shadows, echoes of distant movement, or the sound of doors moving without wind. The history of the monastery enriches these perceptions. Built centuries ago, it was once a hub of spiritual devotion, learning, and communal life. Daily routines filled hallways, courtyards, and towers with motion, sound, and purpose. Even in decay, traces of those routines remain, detectable through architecture, acoustics, and the residual rhythm of human activity embedded in the space. Visitors leave the San Jacinto ruins with a vivid impression of both the past and the present. The monastery communicates through atmosphere, memory, and the subtle interactions of light and sound. The experience is immersive, a blend of awe and quiet tension, demonstrating how spaces shaped by human life continue to hold a presence long after abandonment. Demonstrating how spaces shaped by human life continue to hold a presence long after abandonment. Even in apparent silence, the ruins feel observed. Shadows suggest attention. Doors and shutters respond to presence. The towers watch from above. The monastery remains a place where history, structure, and perception converge. Offering a space that is alive with memory, even as the stones crumble. Mount Grace ruins sit atop a gentle rise, their stone walls weathered by centuries of wind and rain. Once home to dozens of monks, the monastery was a place of devotion, labor, and quiet contemplation. Courtyards, cloisters, and narrow hallways once echoed with footsteps and chants, guiding the rhythm of daily life. Today, the buildings are empty, roofless in places, with collapsed sections exposing the interior to sky and sun. Moss and ivy crawl along crumbling stones, softening edges but leaving the structure with a solemn, enduring presence. During daylight hours, the ruins appear still and peaceful. At sunrise, the atmosphere shifts. Visitors wandering the terraces feel the uneven stones beneath their feet, tracing the lines of walls and corridors that once confined a community devoted to ritual. The air feels heavy with history, yet calm, as if the place has settled into a long slumber. A quiet energy seems to rise with the morning light. Those present report hearing faint chanting drifting through the empty cloisters. The chanting carries a rhythm, a cadence that seems deliberate and purposeful. The sound is often accompanied by another phenomenon. Cold drafts move along the hallways, following corridors and staircases even when no one is present. The air chills suddenly, brushing against skin and clothing, hinting at movement where there is none. Some report feeling the temperature drop sharply as they walk from one room to another, sensing a presence that passes just out of sight. The drafts are localized, moving in patterns that suggest deliberate pacing, as though someone walks through the ruins unseen. Visitors describe a sense of being watched without fear or threat. The experience is subtle but persistent, a reminder that the history of the monastery has left traces that endure in the space itself. The chanting seems to guide the mind, drawing attention to specific areasa along the central cloister, near collapsed altars, or beside arches that frame the valley below. The cold drafts follow, reinforcing the presence of movement and life within a structure long devoid of occupants. At sunset, the same patterns repeat. The light fades behind the hills, and the shadows lengthen across terraces and walls. The chanting returns, this time quieter, layered, as if multiple voices speak in harmony. Footsteps are heard in time with the echoes, soft and deliberate, moving through hallways and open courtyards. The chill lingers in the air, an invisible reminder of human presence that no longer exists. Visitors report the sensation of corridors narrowing slightly, of walls drawing closer, as though the ruins themselves bend toward the living. Historical records offer partial context. Mount Grace was founded centuries ago by an order of monks. Daily schedules included prayer, study, and manual labor. All organized around the rising and setting sun. The monastery grew and flourished, housing dozens of residents at its peak. Over time, wars, neglect, and natural decay led to gradual abandonment. Roofs collapsed, walls eroded, and paths were reclaimed by vegetation. The chanting and movement that visitors perceive today may be echoes of that former routine. Embedded in the architecture and acoustics of the ruins. The ruins themselves reinforce the experience. Stone corridors amplify sound in unexpected ways, allowing faint noises to carry further than normal. Open courtyards reflect voices across walls, producing a layered effect that can mimic multiple speakers. Narrow staircases create drafts, drawing air from one chamber to another. These physical properties contribute to the perception of movement, yet they do not fully explain the emotional weight or the consistent timing of the chanting. Yet they do not fully explain the emotional weight or the consistent timing of the chanting. Those who explore the ruins alone report the most intense sensations. The combination of light, echo, and chill creates heightened awareness. Visitors feel the space responding to their presence, a subtle invitation to move slowly, to listen, and to participate in the rhythm of history. The experience is immersive, drawing attention to details. Faded inscriptions, carved stone benches, the alignment of arcasa that might otherwise go unnoticed. Returning visitors note that the chanting and cold drafts are tied to natural cycles. Sunrise and sunset are the most common times for experiences. Midday and late evening often bring stillness, though occasional movement or sound persists. The ruins seem to mark the passage of time in a way that reinforces both presence and absence. A reminder of the lives once lived within these walls. Mount Grace ruins offer more than historical insight. They provide a space where past and present coexist. Visitors hear the faint chants, sense the footsteps, and feel the cold air trace corridors long abandoned. The architecture holds memory, and the stones themselves seem to retain the rhythm of centuries of devotion. By daylight, the ruins return to a more conventional stillness. Shadows shift with the sun, and the air carries only the scent of earth and growth. The chanting and footsteps remain absent, yet the memory of them lingers for those who have experienced them. Mount Grace remains a place of contemplation and reflection, a site where human presence has left lasting traces beyond physical structures. Visitors encounter not only the remnants of stone and mortar but the lingering impression of ritual and devotion, felt in sound, temperature, and awareness. The ruins stand as a testament to the passage of time, the persistence of memory, and the subtle ways in which history continues to resonate long after its actors have departed. Santa Barbara cloisters stand atop a quiet hill where the city below fades into distance, leaving only the scent of salt and earth carried by coastal winds. Stone walls rise in fractured symmetry, hallways stretching longer than memory expects. Roofs have collapsed in many places, leaving the sky exposed above courtyards and corridors. The floors are uneven, covered with moss, fallen tiles, and patches of overgrown ivy that reclaim what was once carefully maintained. Visitors entering the cloisters immediately notice the sound. Hallways, though open to the sky in places, carry whispers that seem to emerge from the walls themselves. The voice is never clear, just a suggestion of speech, rising and falling in tones that resemble conversation, laughter, or prayer. Each footstep echoes unnaturally, carrying over distances and blending with the faint rustle of leaves, making it difficult to distinguish real movement from memory or imagination. The sensation grows stronger as people explore. The air feels heavier. Temperature shifts subtly, and at times, visitors feel a brush against the skin, soft and fleeting, as though fingers trace the outline of an arm or shoulder. It is never persistent, never painful, but it leaves a shiver in its wake, an awareness that the space around is not entirely empty. Lantern light appears in unexpected places. In windows of rooms where the roof has fallen completely, a warm glow can be seen. A warm glow can be seen, flickering gently as if moved by an unseen hand. The light does not cast shadows in a predictable way. Corridors illuminated from these sources reveal sections of walls and floors while leaving other areas in deep, uniform darkness. Observers often report glancing back to find the lights have moved or vanished entirely, leaving only empty frames behind. The architecture amplifies these impressions. Arched corridors bend sound. Broken archways and fallen columns create pathways for air currents, wind, and echoes to travel unusually. Even a single cough or footstep can return distorted from multiple directions, giving the illusion of presence elsewhere. Courtyards open to the sky allow distant sounds to mingle with the whispering of the halls, creating a layered auditory landscape that is difficult to parse. Those who linger describe a strong sense of history. Every stone seems infused with the lives once lived there. The routines of inhabitants appear to echo still, embedded in the hallways and rooms, waiting for someone to notice. Exploration reveals subtle interactions. A visitor may pause in a hallway, and the whispering seems to respond, fading or rising in volume. Passing through a doorway, the temperature shifts suddenly. A hand brushes against the arm, and the skin feels the warmth of contact that is not there. These interactions are fleeting, never aggressive, but they heighten awareness, sharpening perception and inviting careful attention to detail. At night, the effect intensifies. Moonlight filters through the collapsed roofs, creating irregular patterns across floors and walls. Lanterns glow with greater frequency in the windows, casting light into corridors that seem to extend farther than the structure should allow. Observers notice the play of shadow and illumination shifting subtly, as though guided by movement, although no one is present. The sensation of presence is reinforced by environmental cues. Insects are sparse. The wind carries through hallways in unpredictable ways. Each change in sound, light, or air pressure contributes to the perception that the cloisters are alive with awareness. Visitors frequently describe the urge to move carefully, to pause, or to step back, as if the ruins themselves are guiding their path. Local historians recount the cloisters a gradual abandonment. Declining occupancy, storms, and neglect led to structural collapse over decades. Gardens have grown wild, corridors have fallen into ruin. And yet traces of ritual persist in the layout and atmosphere. Visitors sense this continuity in the whispering, the lantern light, and the touch of air that seems intentional. Attempts to document the phenomena yield partial results. Audio recordings capture faint background sound but rarely the clarity of the whispers. Video captures flickering light, but only when interpreted in context. Touch cannot be recorded. Evidence remains anecdotal, experienced in the moment, ephemeral, and compelling. The combination of history, architecture, and sensory perception creates an immersive experience. Observers describe walking the cloisters with heightened attention, aware of both the past and present. Every step, every sound, every flicker of light contributes to a feeling that the space is both abandoned and inhabited simultaneously. By sunrise, the cloisters return to their quieter state. Whispers fade. Lanterns vanish from windows. The air feels lighter. Shadows retreat with the sun. The hallways, now empty, appear ordinary until the next visitor ventures within. The Santa Barbara cloisters continue to exist in this duality. Where architecture and memory converge, where echoes of lives once lived mingle with sensory anomalies. And where shadows and light maintain the delicate balance between history and perception. Walkers leave with the sense of having shared space with the past. Never fully revealed, and never entirely gone. San Rafael ruins rise on a gentle hill where the earth slopes downward into valleys covered with low vegetation. The monastery appears as fractured stone, towers and walls jagged against the sky. Time has claimed roofs and stairways, leaving only skeletal structures, empty corridors, and open courtyards that catch the wind in strange ways. Light filters unevenly through broken arches, illuminating dust and scattered debris. The air carries a blend of stone, earth, and faint traces of vegetation reclaiming the space. Silence dominates, yet it feels layered, as though the ruins remember every sound ever made within them. Stone courtyards stretch between collapsed walls, their floors uneven with cracked tiles and worn stone. The shadows here are different from ordinary shade. They stretch longer than expected, extending along the ground and walls in ways that do not match the position of the sun. The effect is subtle but unmistakable. Visitors feel it first in the corner of their vision, a distortion of perspective that prompts careful attention. The sensation is disorienting, creating the impression of space shifting beneath the feet. Footsteps echo across the courtyards, but not always the visitore's own. Some report hearing chains dragging along stone floors where no metal exists. The sound is low, resonant, and uneven. It rolls from one corridor to another, soft at first, then louder, as if something unseen is pulling weight across the ruins. The dragging follows pathways naturally, sometimes approaching then retreating, creating tension with anticipation. Those who pause find the sound continuing without alteration, a presence separate from themselves, moving independently. Figures appear in the shadows. At first, they are fleeting suggestions of dark shapes kneeling near arches, behind collapsed walls, or at the far edge of courtyards. They do not rise or turn, but remain still in postures of devotion, hands clasped or bowed low. Looking directly causes the shapes to vanish, dissolving into the texture of stone and air. Moving closer or attempting to approach simply reveals empty space, leaving a sense of absence where presence seems certain. The architecture amplifies the effect. Narrow corridors, high walls, and open courtyards channel sound and shadow in ways that heighten perception. Footsteps echo strangely, wind moves in irregular patterns, and sunlight filtering through cracks exaggerates depth. Every movement by a visitor interacts subtly with the environment, creating the impression that the ruins are responsive. The longer someone remains, the more noticeable the irregularities become. The shadows stretch further, the dragging of chains persists, the figures appear at the edges of vision. Visitors often experience a shift in time perception. Minutes stretch as they pause, examining courtyards, or observing figures in shadow. The brain adjusts to the layered sounds, the elongated shapes, and the inconsistent light, slowing awareness and creating a sense of weight and immersion. What would normally pass unnoticed becomes vivid. A single step seems louder, a faint whisper of air becomes significant. Historical accounts suggest the monastery was founded centuries ago as a site of devotion and contemplation. Monks lived in strict routine, walking courtyards, performing rituals, and engaging in periods of prayer and meditation. Bells, chains for manual work, and organized movement filled the space with rhythm. Over time, decay claimed roofs, walls, and stairways, leaving stone skeletons. Some believe that the ruins retain echoes of these routines, imprinting them on air, sound, and perception. Others attribute the phenomena to natural effects. Irregular stone surfaces, collapsed walls, and archways create unusual acoustics. Wind carries sounds unpredictably. Light filters through openings at changing angles, elongating shadows and creating the illusion of movement. Observers in low light and uneven terrain naturally misinterpret visual cues, filling them with familiar shapes. These explanations account for some of the experience but not all. The dragging sounds, the deliberate pacing of figures, and the consistency across multiple visitors remain difficult to explain fully. Evening enhances the atmosphere. Shadows deepen, stretching across courtyards and corridors. Wind whirls lightly through empty arches. The dragging of chains resonates more clearly against cooler stone. Figures kneeling in prayer appear longer, sharper, their silhouettes sharper against fading light. The combination of sight and sound creates an immersive environment, one that feels alive without visible life. Visitors describe an uneasy fascination. The ruins draw attention forward and outward simultaneously. Guiding eyes along collapsed walls, over open courtyards, and toward distant corridors. The effect is hypnotic. Curiosity urges movement, while caution encourages stillness. Some hikers stop mid-courtyard, listening to chains and observing shadows, then retreat to safer areas, feeling relief as figures vanish and sounds fade. San Rafael ruins remain accessible, studied for history, architecture, and natural beauty. By day, they are striking but static, offering clear views of stonework, courtyards, and surrounding hills. By dusk and into night, however, the ruins shift perceptually. Shadows stretch unnaturally, chains echo without source, and kneeling figures appear briefly in prayer. The site demonstrates a unique interplay of environment, architecture, and human perception, creating experiences that are both immersive and mysterious. The monastery, though abandoned, continues to command attention. Courtyards respond to motion. Sound and shadow converge to produce sensations beyond ordinary observation. Visitors leave with the impression that the ruins hold patterns of past devotion, echoes of those who walked, prayed, and labored centuries ago. San Rafael ruins, in quiet persistence, remain a place where presence endures in absence, where sound, shadow, and memory linger together across centuries, inviting careful observation and respectful awe. St. Helena ruins sit on the edge of a dense forest where trees press close to crumbling stone. Walls once tall and imposing have partially collapsed, leaving jagged edges that blend into moss and undergrowth. Vines wind through cracks, roots lift stones, and the forest seems to have claimed the structure gradually, yet respectfully. Silence dominates the site, punctuated only by the whisper of wind through leaves and the occasional call of distant birds. Visitors tread carefully across uneven ground. Loose stones shift underfoot. Fallen beams lie scattered, partially buried in soil. The paths between walls are narrow and winding, bordered by remnants of archways and pillars. Every step produces subtle echoes, and sound travels strangely, carried by stone and open air. Light filters through the canopy, creating moving patterns across moss and rubble. A sense of being observed often follows. Even when the forest appears empty, visitors report feeling eyes upon them. The sensation is subtle at first, a prickling at the back of the neck, a weight in the air. It intensifies as one approaches the interior walls or moves past collapsed arches. Turning abruptly reveals nothing. Shadows among the trees remain still. The forest itself seems to hold its breath. Soft chanting occasionally rises through the trees. The sound is low and rhythmic, carried on the wind from a source unseen. The words are indistinct, layered with the rustling of leaves and the occasional bird call. It is not loud enough to be disruptive, yet it is noticeable enough to make travelers pause. The cadence feels deliberate, almost ceremonial, and seems to follow the observer as they move through the ruins. A tightening in the chest, heightened awareness of surrounding space, and a subtle hesitation in movement. The combination of sound, observation, and environment produces a profound sense of presence. One becomes acutely conscious of each step, each gesture, each glance toward the collapsed walls or the dense trees beyond. Gaps in walls frame parts of the forest, directing vision through natural windows. Fallen beams and tilted pillars form corridors that suggest movement while constraining it. Shadows stretch along moss-covered stone, shifting as sunlight filters through leaves. The site feels designed to be explored carefully, as if the architecture, even in decay, anticipates human attention. Historical accounts add context. St. Helena once served as a monastery, a place of ritual, study, and contemplation. Walls enclosed courtyards where monks walked in quiet procession. Stone corridors led to chapels and cells. Chanting would have been a daily occurrence, structured and repetitive, guiding both action and reflection. The ruins preserve the spatial memory of these practices. The forest interacts with the ruins. Trees bend toward the walls in some areas, shade corridors, and amplify sound. The wind carries fragments of noise over the canopy, sometimes producing echoes that resemble distant footsteps or whispered speech. Fallen leaves and debris create subtle motion that can be mistaken for human presence. Visitors often interpret this as more than environmental effects. The environment is designed to evoke a sense of unease and foreboding. Figures are sometimes reported among the stones, glimpsed at the edges of vision. Monks in robes, standing silently near collapsed walls or at the tops of partially intact pillars. They vanish when approached. No detail remains, only the impression of presence. Observers describe a sense of attention, as if the figures are aware of their presence but do not intend harm. Light and shadow play a crucial role. The angle of the sun changes perception, deepening the mystery. Late afternoon provides long, soft shadows that obscure details. Fog and morning mist can blur edges further, creating shifting shapes that appear intentional. Observers often pause to differentiate between natural phenomena and something beyond explanation. Sound interacts with movement. A leaf falling can echo through a corridor. Footsteps produce multiple layers of sound as they reverberate against stone and earth. Combined with the chanting carried by wind, the auditory environment becomes immersive, making the observer feel both guided and watched. Time feels different in the ruins. Minutes stretch longer than expected. The distance between points seems variable, altered by shifting light, uneven ground, and perception influenced by sound. Visitors report a heightened awareness of their surroundings, moving slowly, carefully, attuned to every sensory input. The effect is cumulative. The longer one remains, the stronger the sensation of observation and presence. Shadows appear to move at the periphery. The chanting rises and falls unpredictably. Even experienced travelers report a profound sense of stillness, punctuated by sudden awareness of something unseen nearby. By evening, the ruins transform. Sunlight fades, leaving cool shadows. The forest darkens. Figures, if present, disappear entirely. The chanting ceases or becomes indistinguishable from wind in the trees. Observers feel the release of attention as darkness blankets the site, yet the memory of presence remains. Visitors leave with lasting impressions. The combination of ruined architecture, attentive forest, and subtle auditory phenomena creates an experience both immersive and unsettling. The stone, the trees, and the wind together preserve the history and presence of those who once occupied the site. St. Helena ruins endure. Collapsing walls, scattered pillars, and reclaimed archways form a labyrinth of stone and shadow. Figures appear briefly, chanting echoes through trees. Footsteps carry where no one is present. Where memory and environment intertwine. Where visitors feel watched. And where history lingers in the air. Waiting for the next careful observer to step among the ruins. And bear witness to the silence. The shadows. And the lingering presence that continues to inhabit St. Helena. Mount Carmel Chapel ruins sit atop a gentle rise, surrounded by overgrown grass and scattered trees. The main chapel roof is gone, leaving the interior open to the sky. Sunlight falls unevenly across stone floors littered with fallen beams, broken pews, and remnants of altar cloths. The air carries a faint scent of damp earth and moss, thickened by the weight of time and disuse. Visitors step carefully across the uneven floor, their footsteps echoing off walls that still stand tall, though cracked and worn. The arches that once framed stained glass now expose empty frames, and the altar, though crumbling, remains centered, a focal point in the desolation. Light moves across the space in shifting patterns, revealing details only briefly before shadows reclaim them. Figures are sometimes seen kneeling at the altar. Closer observation reveals that these figures vanish mid-gesture, fading as though drawn back into the stone beneath them. They do not move elsewhere, nor do they leave traces. Their presence is brief but unmistakable, leaving a lingering impression that the chapel continues to host devotion even in ruin. The sensation of being watched is subtle. Visitors report feeling sudden cold pressing against their backs. A chill that arrives without wind or movement. It is localized and fleeting, enough to make one pause or shiver, yet it fades as quickly as it comes. The effect heightens awareness, drawing attention to the ruins in a way that makes every shadow and shape significant. Inside the chapel, sound behaves differently. Footsteps echo unusually, sometimes longer than expected. Sometimes seeming to originate from a different location. Even distant noises carry an amplified weight, making the space feel both larger and more intimate simultaneously. The altar draws repeated attention. The stone is cracked, yet the surface remains recognizable. Figures kneeling here often appear aligned with what would have been the center of the chapel, following patterns of devotion consistent with historical use. They do not interact with visitors, yet their presence adds depth to the experience, reinforcing the sense that the chapel retains echoes of its past life. Visitors who pause near these figures or the altar often feel a sudden pressure on their chest or shoulders, a cold that is heavier than ambient air. It is not harmful, but it is enough to evoke the sensation of unseen proximity. The effect often coincides with glimpses of figures, reinforcing the impression of presence. The chapel ruins extend beyond the main hall. Side rooms and cloisters are partially intact, filled with rubble and overgrowth. Shaded corridors lead to spaces that no longer serve a purpose, where echoes carry longer and movement feels slower. Doors that once closed now hang loosely on frames, moving slightly as if nudged by invisible hands. Visitors hear faint creaks and taps, subtle enough to question, yet consistent across multiple accounts. Light interacts with the ruins in ways that alter perception. Morning sun casts long, low beams that illuminate details otherwise hidden. Afternoon light filters through gaps in the roof, creating patterns that resemble movement in the shadows. Evening light softens angles and elongates arches, making the space feel simultaneously open and enclosed. Shadows stretch and shift unpredictably, giving the impression of figures appearing and disappearing without clear origin. Historical records indicate the chapel was once active with daily rituals and regular gatherings. Its architecture emphasized symmetry, focus on the altar, and repetition of arches and columns to guide both movement and attention. Visitors often feel drawn towards certain areas intuitively, guided by what once defined communal life within the chapel. The combination of visual, auditory, and sensory cues creates an immersive experience. Figures kneeling, cold sensations, and echoing steps contribute to a sense of continuity between past and present. Shifting light all contribute to a sense of continuity between past and present. The ruins are not threatening, yet they maintain a presence that demands attention and respect. Even brief visits leave a lasting impression. Those who walk through the main hall report heightened awareness of surroundings, a sensitivity to subtle changes in light, sound, and temperature. The space encourages reflection, both on the history of the site and on the nature of human perception in abandoned environments. As shadows lengthen and the day wanes, the chapel feels more alive. Figures appear with greater clarity, the cold seems sharper. And echoes travel farther, and distant creaks from collapsed sections, adding layers to the auditory experience. The ruins continue to speak, not with words, but with presence, memory, and subtle shifts in the environment. The wind, though absent at times, can carry distant creaks from collapsed sections, adding layers to the auditory experience. The ruins continue to speak, not with words, but with presence, memory, and subtle shifts in the environment. Mount Carmel Chapel ruins endure as a place where history and perception intersect. The missing roof allows the sky to penetrate deep into the interior. The stone walls preserve echoes of devotion. Figures kneel and vanish, cold presses without warning. Every sound carries weight. Visitors experience a space that bridges centuries, where human activity continues in impression, guiding attention, and shaping the awareness of those who enter. Those who leave often do so quietly, carrying a sense of solemnity and reflection. The experience lingers, not as fear, but as a recognition that even in decay, places shaped by devotion retain an essence of presence. Mount Carmel Chapel ruins remain a site where history, architecture, and perception combine, creating a quiet, immersive environment that continues to resonate long after the last visitor has departed. San Mateo ruins sit on a secluded hillside, their stone walls weathered and worn but still imposing. Once a facility of order and confinement, the complex is now abandoned, its corridors silent and its purpose long forgotten. Rusted iron gates hang crookedly in doorways. Windows are shattered or missing entirely, yet some retain fragments of glass that catch the sunlight, reflecting faint glimmers onto the dusty floors. The hillside below is strewn with fallen masonry, evidence of centuries of neglect and partial collapse. Inside, the abandoned cells remain intact. Heavy doors are locked in place or warped by age, hinges frozen with rust. The walls, though chipped and cracked, enclose small rooms that once held lives in strict routines. Visitors walking through the corridors report a tangible sense of stillness. The air feels thick with memory, and even the slightest sound seems magnified. Carried along stone passageways that twist and turn without warning. Footsteps echo along hallways blocked by rubble. Stones and fallen beams litter some paths, forcing travelers to step carefully. Their own footsteps amplified by empty corridors. Often the sound seems to follow them, carrying along walls and corners. As though Sumania or Somthinga has moved in the same rhythm moments before. The echoes feel deliberate, not chaotic, giving the impression of a presence that once patrolled these halls. And continues in a loop of memory. Figures are occasionally seen staring from windows high above. They do not move. They do not gesture. Shadows framed against the sky, their outlines suggest form and intention, yet when approached or viewed from another angle, they vanish. Visitors describe the sensation of being observed without any direct interaction. The eyes seem to follow, unblinking, as if aware of every step taken below, creating a feeling of both scrutiny and vigilance. The architecture of San Mateo amplifies these sensations. Narrow hallways, intersecting staircases, and open courtyards allow sound and light to travel unpredictably. A footstep on the stone floor may echo multiple times or carry along walls to distant corners. Sunlight filtering through shattered windows creates shifting patterns of light and shadow, enhancing the perception of movement where none exists. The effect is immersive, drawing attention to the smallest details of the ruins while reinforcing the sense that the space is still alive with echoes of the past. Visitors often report subtle physical sensations. The air can feel cooler near collapsed sections. A slight draft moves through blocked corridors, brushing against skin as though an unseen occupant has passed. Heartbeats quicken in anticipation of movement, and the mind instinctively searches for signs of life, only to find silence or shifting shadows. The ruins demand vigilance, and attention becomes acute with each step, each glance, each sound. Historical accounts provide context for the building's lingering atmosphere. San Mateo was once a site of strict discipline, its cells housing residents under continuous supervision. Guards patrolled the hallways, enforcing rules and ensuring that order was maintained. Daily routines dictated movement and activity within the complex, creating a rhythm that may have left residual impressions in the stone and structure. Over time, as the facility fell into disuse and eventual abandonment, natural decay and human neglect transformed it from a place of control into a site of mystery and quiet reverence. Chroniclers and visitors alike note the patterns of perceived presence. Footsteps echo in areas inaccessible to the living, and figures appear at heights impossible to reach without equipment or ladders. The consistency of these reports suggests that the ruins retain traces of their historical use, replayed subtly to those attuned to the environment. Observers describe a rhythm and timing to these experiences, as though the building itself rehearses the actions of past occupants for anyone willing to notice. The interplay of light, shadow, and sound reinforces the sense of immersion. Early morning sun casts long, thin beams through openings in walls, creating the impression of figures moving across floors. Dust particles illuminated by these rays seem to float in patterns that evoke motion. At dusk, fading light elongates shadows and stretches the perception of depth, enhancing the feeling of presence. Even absent any visual cues, footsteps and low sounds carry along stone passageways, shaping a narrative that blends reality with memory. Even absent any visual cues, footsteps and low sounds carry along stone passageways, shaping a narrative that blends reality with memory. Visitors navigating the ruins are often drawn to higher windows and ledges, hoping to glimpse the figures seen from below. The perspective amplifies the sense of scale and history. From above, the complex feels both expansive and confining, a network of vertical and horizontal spaces layered over centuries of human activity. The sight of motionless forms framed against the sky reinforces the perception of continuity, as though the past has not fully departed. Despite the eerie impressions, San Mateo remains safe to explore. The sensations of observation, cold drafts, and echoing footsteps do not pose physical danger. Rather, they encourage mindfulness, attention to environment, and respect for the history embedded in the stone. Many visitors leave with a sense of reverence, reflecting on the lives once contained within the walls and the persistence of memory in architecture. At night, the ruins take on a different character. Moonlight casts pale illumination across corridors and courtyards, highlighting textures of stone and rubble. The shadows deepen, and the echoes of footsteps carry farther along the halls. Figures at windows appear intermittently, their outlines sharp against the moonlit sky. The combined effect is immersive, creating a narrative of presence, absence, and lingering devotion to routine and discipline. San Mateo ruins endure as a place where history is both tangible and perceptual. Footsteps echo, figures appear and disappear, and the building communicates subtly through temperature, light, and sound. Visitors encounter not only the physical remnants of stone and mortar but the enduring traces of movement, observation, and presence. The ruins stand as a testament to time, memory, and the subtle persistence of human activity, allowing anyone who walks the corridors to sense the echoes of lives once fully lived within their walls. Mission Dolores ruins stand perched on a hill overlooking the valley below, where the landscape stretches into layers of green and shadow. The remnants of stone walls rise unevenly, arches fractured but still graceful. Staircases leading to empty platforms where floors have crumbled over time. Wind moves freely through the open spaces, carrying the scent of earth, moss, and the faint tang of distant smoke from valleys far below. Each stone bears the weight of history, the trace of lives lived in devotion and labor. Visitors stepping onto the grounds are struck by the stillness. The ruins are largely silent, yet not empty. Every footstep echoes unnaturally across the exposed terraces. The air feels heavier here, as if memory itself has taken root in the walls, pressing gently against those who explore. Then the sound begins. Distant bells ring softly, their tones faint but unmistakable. The rhythm is slow and deliberate, uneven as if played by hands long absent. Along with the bells comes chanting, voices layered in harmony yet impossible to localize. The chanting rises and falls, sometimes steady, sometimes fading into the wind, carrying across staircases and courtyards where no one stands. Observers describe the sound as calming at first, then subtly unsettling, creating a sense that something is aware of their presence. Shadows move across the ruins in ways that defy expectation. Light falling through fractured arches casts shapes onto floors and walls, yet the forms shift independently of the sun. Stairs that should hold nothing more than stone seem to carry figures that pause and pivot at angles impossible for human balance. Columns stretch and shrink in the corner of vision, while shapes move between the broken walls as though navigating an unseen purpose. Observers often turn quickly, only to find emptiness and still stone. The architecture amplifies these phenomena. Arches funnel sound. Corridors reflect echoes. Staircases carry the wind in patterns that create impressionistic tones of footfalls and whispered voices. The ruins themselves seem to direct attention, guiding the eye toward courtyards or passages where the play of shadow and light is most intense. Each element interacts, creating an environment in which perception bends, and the ordinary becomes uncanny. Visitors feel the presence more than they see it. A faint brush against the arm, a movement in peripheral vision, or a shifting of shadow is enough to suggest proximity. No figure is ever fully visible. Yet the mind interprets these cues as living motion, responding to the observer's attention with subtle timing and awareness. Mission Dolores was once a center of devotion and learning. Monks and missionaries occupied the site, moving in carefully timed routines of prayer, study, and labor. Bells marked hours of meditation and service. Staircases carried novices and elders alike, arches sheltered contemplative silence. Over decades, repetition left patterns in the stone, grooves in stair treads, and marks of hands along rails. The ruins preserve these traces, allowing them to interact with visitors long after the structures themselves fell into disrepair. Exploration deepens the effect. Walkways lead from terraces to courtyards where walls have collapsed entirely. Each step is measured. Stone shifts beneath the weight of visitors. The chanting seems to respond to direction and movement, growing in clarity when approached and receding when distance is gained. The sound appears to originate from multiple points simultaneously, creating a sense that voices surround the observer, guiding and observing without visible presence. Light behaves unpredictably. Lanterns, or their flickering imitation, appear in windows of rooms with no roof. The glow shifts, illuminating broken floors and fragments of arches. Then vanishes when approached. The effect is enhanced at dusk, when ambient light is low and shadows lengthen across fractured walls. The ruins feel alive in response to attention. Yet remain uninhabited in any conventional sense. Those who linger report altered perception of time. Minutes stretch unexpectedly. Steps echo longer than anticipated. Steps echo longer than anticipated. Distance feels misjudged as if the space itself has shifted subtly while attention is focused elsewhere. Distance feels misjudged as if the space itself has shifted subtly while attention is focused elsewhere. The combination of sound, light, and shadow produces a rhythm that commands awareness. The combination of sound, light, and shadow produces a rhythm that commands awareness, drawing observers through corridors and along staircases in patterns that echo past activity. The experience is immersive and persistent. Even after leaving the ruins, the memory of shadowed forms, distant bells, and chanting remains. Observers describe the sensation of being watched, guided, or accompanied long after departing, a lingering awareness that Mission Dolores retains fragments of its history within its stones. The arches, staircases, and broken walls preserve echoes of devotion. Shadows move independently, sounds layer over silence, and light appears without source. Visitors experience these elements together, feeling presence without encounter, memory without record. The site exists simultaneously as ruin and witness, offering a space where the past continues to whisper. Where attention becomes participation, and where the living and departed meet quietly among the fractured stones. The flickering glow, and the resonant hum of devotion preserved across centuries. Holy Angels Monastery ruins perch atop a windswept hill, overlooking valleys of dense forest and distant farmland. Stone walls rise jagged against the sky, fractured by time, their surfaces weathered and mottled with moss. Broken arches, collapsed roofs, and scattered columns mark the passage of centuries. The wind moves freely through the open spaces, carrying the scents of earth, stone, and wild vegetation. And the air feels different here, heavier, as though it has absorbed the weight of countless prayers. Visitors often arrive along narrow paths that wind up the hillside. Gravel crunches underfoot, echoing softly between walls and empty corridors. The ruins stretch outward in terraces and courtyards, the architecture guiding attention toward empty chapels, shattered stairways, and broken balconies that overlook the surrounding landscape. Sudden gusts of wind are among the first sensations that alert hikers. They arrive unpredictably, sweeping across the terraces and through open corridors. The force is enough to turn clothing or lift leaves and small debris. Carried within these gusts are whispers, faint and layered, following the contours of stone and echoing across open spaces. The voices are indistinct, sometimes syllables or fragments of words, never coherent, but they are unmistakably present. Visitors instinctively pause, scanning corridors, corners, and distant courtyards, yet nothing is visible. The air itself feels thick and heavy. It moves differently than wind elsewhere, lingering, pressing slightly against skin and clothing. Breathing becomes a subtle, conscious act. Many report an intangible sense of being observed, as though the monastery continues to hold presence in the absence of life. There is no fear, only heightened awareness, a feeling that attention is shared across time and space. Figures appear within this space. At first, they are glimpsessa shapes moving through collapsed rooms, stepping across floors where tiles and stones have long shifted or broken. They resemble monks, their outlines tall and robed, moving with deliberation, hands held at sides or clasped. They walk silently, never making noise that correlates with steps on the stone or debris underfoot. Footprints do not appear in the dust or dirt, and surfaces remain undisturbed. Observers often blink or turn, only to find the space empty, yet the impression of motion remains. The effect is enhanced by the monastery's structure. High walls reflect light unevenly. Open windows and collapsed ceilings allow air to move unpredictably. These features amplify perception, making distant gusts or faint echoes seem close. Shadows stretch along walls and floors, sometimes appearing as extensions of the figures, creating a continuity between what is seen and what is imagined. Visitors describe a layered experience. The wind moves. The whispers rise. And figures appear, all within a space that is both tangible and elusive. Time perception shifts. Minutes can feel like hours. The movement of the figure seems to respond to attention without deliberate interaction. Pausing, stepping forward, or shifting orientation affects the impression of motion, though no entity is physically present. The ruins appear to guide perception subtly, creating patterns that are coherent yet mysterious. Historically, Holy Angels Monastery was a place of devotion and isolation. Monks followed strict routines, walking corridors, performing rituals, and engaging in daily prayer. Water, bells, and chants once filled the courtyards, layering the space with rhythm. Over centuries, collapse and decay claimed roofs, stairways, and living quarters. The walls retain the forms and sounds of these routines, embedding echoes into stone and air. Visitors today perceive these echoes not as memories alone, but as active elements that interact with movement and attention. Natural explanations exist. Gusts of wind follow predictable paths through open terraces and broken corridors. Stone reflects and distorts sound. Shifting sunlight creates elongated shadows. Human perception can misinterpret motion and echo in low-contrast or highly textured environments. Yet these explanations alone cannot account for the consistency or layering of experiences. Multiple observers at different times report similar sensations, the same patterns of wind, whisper, and figure movement, suggesting more than random chance. The ruins are particularly immersive at dusk and early evening. Light dims unevenly across courtyards and corridors. Gusts intensify in narrow spaces. Whispers are more distinct against the quieting landscape. Figures appear sharper in peripheral vision, pacing along collapsed floors or between arches, vanishing when approached directly. The environment combines sensory input into a compelling, layered perception that is difficult to separate into discrete phenomena. Those who leave the monastery often describe lingering awareness. Even once back on the hillside trail, the memory of wind, whispers, and figures persists. Clothing or hair may feel briefly touched, as if the unseen presence remains close. The impression is subtle, never threatening, yet undeniably present. Holy Angels Monastery ruins continue to stand as a place of quiet contemplation, historical study, and natural beauty. By day, the ruins appear serene, offering views of hills, valleys, and sky. By evening or under shifting wind, the ruins reveal their layered character: air, shadow, sound, and perception intertwined. Visitors are reminded that spaces shaped by centuries of devotion can carry traces of activity, presence, and rhythm long after the last person has departed, leaving a sense of reverence, mystery, and continuity in their wake. San Pedro ruins lie hidden beneath a canopy of overgrown vegetation. Vines climb collapsed walls, weaving through broken archways and crumbling stone, while moss carpets the remaining floors. The monastery, once a place of order and devotion, now appears swallowed by the surrounding forest. Its outlines softened by leaves and branches. Light filters through gaps in the canopy, casting dappled patterns on walls that have stood for centuries. Silence dominates the space, yet it is the kind that feels deliberate, attentive, and alive. Visitors tread carefully among the ruins. Every step presses into uneven stone or soft soil. Loose bricks shift beneath their weight. Fallen beams and partially collapsed walls form narrow corridors where movement requires attention and care. Shadows stretch long across moss and debris, shifting subtly as sunlight passes through leaves. The air is heavy, scented with earth, decay, and the subtle sweetness of new growth. At the edges of the forest, figures sometimes appear. Silhouettes emerge among dense foliage, watching the ruins quietly. They are humanoid in shape, often seen peering from behind tree trunks or standing at the edge of clearings. They remain still, observing but not moving closer. When visitors attempt to approach, the figures vanish, leaving the forest undisturbed. Footsteps echo across the stone floors. The sound is subtle, soft at first, then clearer, as if another presence is walking just out of sight. It mirrors the steps of those moving through the ruins, matching rhythm and pace without faltering. Visitors glance around, expecting someone to emerge from the shadows, but the space remains empty. The effect is disorienting, a combination of sound and sensation that suggests accompaniment without any visible source. Thick vines, fallen beams, and leaning walls create an irregular environment that manipulates line of sight. Openings in the forest frame glimpses of the ruins, directing attention toward spaces just beyond view. Shadows twist and stretch along broken surfaces, creating shapes that appear intentional. Movement in these corridors feels guided, yet the path forward is uncertain. Historical records illuminate the monastery's past. San Pedro Monastery was founded centuries ago, a place of prayer, study, and ritual. Monks moved in measured cadence through cloisters and chapels, their footsteps soft but deliberate. Archways and walls were designed to guide movement, to frame meditation and reflection. The ruins preserve the memory of this discipline, the architecture still influencing motion and attention. Wind shifts through branches, carrying sound along corridors and across open spaces. Leaves fall onto stone with soft taps that echo. Subtle vibrations travel through the ground, combining with natural acoustics to make steps and whispers appear closer or more distant than they are. Visitors often interpret these effects as evidence of presence. The figures at the forest edge are consistent. Observers report seeing them at similar locations, always near openings that face the ruins. Some appear to be clothed in flowing robes, their outlines softened by foliage and distance. They do not speak, gesture, or approach. Their purpose is unclear, yet they seem to maintain a quiet vigilance over the monastery. Footstep echoes enhance the effect. The sound interacts with stone and soil, creating a sense of accompaniment. Sometimes visitors pause, expecting movement behind them, only to find emptiness. Other times, steps seem to precede their own, urging them forward or keeping pace silently alongside them. The phenomenon is unpredictable but unmistakable. Time feels different within the ruins. Minutes stretch longer than expected. Corridors appear to lengthen. Openings in walls seem farther apart than anticipated. Visitors experience heightened awareness of their surroundings, paying attention to subtle shifts in sound, light, and shadow. The ruins demand careful observation. Mist or fog sometimes settles over the ruins. In these moments, the atmosphere intensifies. Shadows become softer, figures more ethereal. Footsteps echo louder. Leaves rustle more distinctly. The ruins appear alive in a way that daylight and clarity do not reveal. Visitors describe physical reactions. A tightening in the chest, a sense of weight, a subtle tension in posture. Awareness heightens. Every sound is amplified. Every movement of air or branch draws attention. The effect is not frightening, yet it compels caution and focus. By late afternoon, shadows stretch long and figures are often most noticeable. Observers report a sensation of being watched, and subtle movement at the edge of sight. Approaching the figures results in disappearance. Stepping carefully across corridors continues to produce echoed footsteps, reinforcing the sense of unseen company. Night transforms the ruins further. Light fades, the forest darkens, and perception shifts. Shadows deepen. The figures vanish entirely. Footsteps are less distinct but occasionally return in moments of silence. Observers feel the residual sense of attention, a memory of presence lingering in stone, soil, and foliage. Visitors leave carrying lasting impressions. They remember glimpses of figures, echoed steps, and the quiet weight of observation. The experience lingers, a combination of sensory and emotional awareness tied to the ruins and surrounding forest. San Pedro ruins endure. Walls partially collapsed into the forest, corridors softened by nature, shadows moving with light, figures appearing and vanishing, footsteps echoing in stone. The monastery remains a space where memory, observation, and the subtle presence of history converge, offering visitors a tangible connection to lives once lived and a quiet reminder that some places retain attention long after they are abandoned. Mount Sinai ruins rise from the landscape like a city paused between past and present. The largest of all the ruins in the region, it sprawls across acres. With towers still partially standing and courtyards framed by weathered stone walls. Broken arches and crumbling staircases lead to spaces once used for worship, study, and communal life. The sky presses down through gaps where roofs have fallen, casting uneven light that shifts with the sun. Visitors stepping onto the site immediately sense the scale of what remains. The largest courtyard opens wide, stone paving cracked and worn, weeds pushing through gaps. Faded carvings mark walls and steps, remnants of devotion and daily life. The air is cool and still, heavy with the scent of stone warmed by sunlight and dampness that seeps from hidden corners. Every sound carries, echoing off walls, making footsteps and movement feel amplified and deliberate. Even in daylight, the ruins convey a sense of activity that no longer exists. Towers jut upward, dark and hollow, suggesting observation and presence. Visitors often pause at their bases, looking up, imagining figures once perched to watch over the grounds. Courtyards that once hosted gatherings now feel like arenas of silence, yet the mind fills the space with echoes of past motion. As midnight approaches, the character of the ruins changes. The open courtyards darken first, the shadows from broken towers stretching across stone. The wind through arches and empty windows carries a chill that deepens the sense of isolation. And then the sounds begin. Chants drift across the site, soft at first, almost imperceptible. They rise and fall in a pattern that mimics communal prayer, though no source is visible. Footsteps follow, measured and steady, crossing corridors and courtyards where no one moves. Occasionally, the faint ringing of bells punctuates the rhythm, echoing from towers that no longer contain functional mechanisms. The combination of sound and space creates an immersive auditory experience, as if the monastery itself is alive once more. Visitors report another sensation that accompanies the soundscape. Hands press against their shoulders from behind. The touch is brief and gentle, not threatening, yet unmistakable. Turning reveals no one present. The effect does not repeat predictably. Some feel it once, others multiple times, always without visual confirmation. The physical sensation reinforces the sense of presence in a space otherwise empty. The interaction of light, shadow, and sound shapes perception in the ruins. Figures kneeling or standing in imagination become more plausible. Footsteps and chants interact with architectural acoustics, producing resonance that seems spatially precise, moving through hallways and courtyards as though guided by unseen patterns. Walking through the main hall, visitors note how the stone floors amplify subtle movements. Dust disturbed by a single step drifts slowly in shafts of light. Collapsed roof beams filter the wind, creating brief gusts that carry sound and temperature changes into sensitive corners. Even empty rooms feel weighted, the combination of scale, echo, and memory making each space immersive and tense. The towers contribute a unique presence. From the forested edges or distant courtyards, they loom, darkened and hollow. Observers report seeing dark shapes at upper windows. These shapes vanish when approached, yet their fleeting visibility reinforces the sense that the ruins retain a form of vigilance, a memory of human observation encoded in stone. History explains the design, if not the sensations. Mount Sinai Monastery was once a hub of religious life. With daily routines defined by structured prayer, labor, and study. Towers served for both observation and bell ringing. Corridors directed processions, and courtyards facilitated gathering and reflection. Every aspect of the architecture reinforced rhythm, order, and communal presence. That rhythm persists subtly in the ruins. Footfalls, echoes, and light all suggest patterns once performed. The combination of sensory cues creates a distinct experience. Figures kneel at altars that no longer exist. Footsteps traverse empty hallways. Figures kneel at altars that no longer exist. Footsteps traverse empty hallways. Bells ring from towers long fallen. Figures kneel at altars that no longer exist. Footsteps traverse empty hallways. Bells ring from towers long fallen. Hands press briefly on shoulders. Figures kneel at altars that no longer exist. Footsteps traverse empty hallways. Bells ring from towers long fallen. Hands press briefly on shoulders. All of these elements converge to suggest a continuation of life and routine. Visitors often describe the effect as immersive rather than frightening. There is no threat, no aggressive motion. The ruins communicate through impression, encouraging attention to detail and engagement with the space. The experience blends observation, imagination, and environmental cues, resulting in a heightened awareness of presence. Even in decay, Mount Sinai ruins maintain a remarkable coherence. Courtyards, halls, towers, and stairways retain orientation and function. The senses of scale, pattern, and purpose remain intact, guiding perception. Shadows, light, and sound interact with architecture to create the impression of activity and life. By dawn, the experience softens. Chants fade. Footsteps vanish. The towers appear. The courtyards return to. Visitors leave with the memory of presence, rhythm, and subtle engagement with a space that is no longer inhabited, yet retains the echoes of human life. Mount Sinai ruins remain a testament to endurance, design, and memory. Towers and courtyards, partially intact, continue to shape perception. Figures kneel and vanish, footsteps echo. Figures kneel and vanish, footsteps echo, bells ring faintly. Figures kneel and vanish, footsteps echo, bells ring faintly, and the touch of presence is felt without source. Figures kneel and vanish, footsteps echo, bells ring faintly, and the touch of presence is felt without source. The site invites visitors to engage attentively. Figures kneel and vanish, footsteps echo, bells ring faintly, and the touch of presence is felt without source. The site invites visitors to engage attentively, teaching that even in ruin, spaces can remain alive through architecture, history, and the delicate interplay of perception and memory. Figures kneel and vanish, footsteps echo, bells ring faintly, and the touch of presence is felt without source. The site invites visitors to engage attentively, teaching that even in ruin, spaces can remain alive through architecture, history, and the delicate interplay of perception and memory. Figures kneel and vanish, footsteps echo, bells ring faintly, and the touch of presence is felt without source. The site invites visitors to engage attentively, teaching that even in ruin, spaces can remain alive through architecture, history, and the delicate interplay of perception and memory. Thank you for exploring the haunted monastery ruins of California with me tonight. These stones once housed devotion, contemplation, and sacred rituals. But over the centuries, tragedy, abandonment, and secrets became part of the walls, the halls, and the gardens. Some who wander through these ruins feel nothing. Some feel cold eyes following them. And some leave forever changed, carrying whispers and shadows that follow them home. If you ever find yourself near an abandoned monastery in California, listen to the wind. Watch the shadows. And never ignore the feeling that you are not alone. Would you dare spend a night alone among these haunted ruins? Or would you retreat before the walls close in around you? Rest well, my friend. Until our next haunted journey.